You guys already know Japan, a smaller country on the eastern side of Asia that seems like it doesn't bother anybody. But this is not the same Japan that wanted to own the entire world in World War II. In the worst case possible, they would enslave the people around them. Like in Korea, they made the men their slaves and the women sex slaves. And Korea always asks for them to apologize, but the Japanese never do. But we're just passing by Korea. The main focus is China. If you've seen our video about Unit 731 of Japan, you know what the Japanese did to the Chinese. But in this clip, we're gonna look at another side of the cruelty the Japanese did, the Nanjing Massacre. You have to know that in the 1930s, China's capital was Nanjing. In the December of 1937, the Japanese attacked Nanjing. After Japan got Nanjing, basically the entire country was in Japanese hands. When the Japanese conquered, there was 4,000 Chinese soldiers left. But the Japanese didn't want to feed them, give them a place to stay like a prison. And that is why on the same day, they killed every single one of them. The Japanese really hated the other Asians except themselves. They believe the best Asian is the Japanese, and the Koreans, Chinese, Filipinos, all are disgusting. And the Japanese soldiers were people that were taught this all throughout their early childhood, that Japanese is superior and everyone else stinks. Like we said, China was in Japanese hands, but obviously they were against them. And that is why the Japanese want to set an example in a way so nobody stays in front of them. And that is why they choose Nanjing to set this example. When the Japanese soldiers would walk around people in Nanjing, the people would shake. One of those days, 2 Japanese soldiers made a bet, and they told the reporter to be the witness. They said, "We made a bet to cut Chinese heads off, and whoever reaches 100 heads is the winner." They started cutting normal people heads off, and the reporter counts it. This is not a story, this happened for real. These 2 soldiers you're seeing cut more than 200 Chinese heads off, and the one on the left was the winner. It seems like the Mongols got a bad rap, because when you read about the Japanese back then, they're pretty similar. The 200 heads these guys cut is a small portion of the story. When they got the city, they would walk on the streets, kill people, rape the young girls, and then kill them, kill the kids, and then they would set fire to any building. When they had a huge population and they didn't want the city to be piled with bodies, they would make everybody walk towards the river. Then they would kill them with a bullet and throw them in the river. Each officer would kill their own herd a different way. Like you see an officer have 300 to 400 people around him and he sets them on fire. Another officer would kill him with bullets, another one with a sword. Every officer would make an area and they would take the crowd over there, a place where there's guards all around. They would put him there except the young women. They would rape the young women, then put them in the area. At that time, the Nazis and the Japanese were allies. And in Nanjing, there was German reporters. One of the German reporters say that they collect all the young Chinese girls, and when there's more than 1,000 of them, they rape each one, and then they would kill them. They also wrote that in this city, you could not sleep at night, because until the morning, you hear screams. The Germans said we couldn't tell them anything. We couldn't even ask them why. If we said anything, we would be joining the Chinese. In the news, they wrote 20,000 Chinese women were raped, but the Chinese say this is 100% false. The real number is more than 100,000 women. History Channel says about 80,000 women were raped. Either way, nobody has the actual statistic. The Japanese continued the killing for 6 weeks, and when they saw the frightened faces of the Chinese, they kind of stopped. Some people believe in this 6 weeks, 300,000 people died. But others say this number is a joke. They believe if not 1 million people died, about 800,000 people were killed. You have to know that all these people that were murdered were normal people in the city, not soldiers. There is no real statistics because they threw the body in the river, they burned them, or after 6 weeks, the Chinese themselves came and buried them. Either way, China until 1945, meaning the day where the atom bombs were dropped, was being ran over by the Japanese army. They would kill, rape, burn, and enslave. After the war was over, all the Japanese officers were responsible for this were arrested, and a few of them were executed. But the main one, not only did they not go to trial, they also gave them medals. It seems like the Chinese location is very unlucky because the Mongols took over, and that is why they built the Great Wall of China. But the Mongols were still able to get through and take over. And on the other side, we got the Japanese. Anything bad, they did it to the Chinese. The Nanjing Massacre and Unit 731 is one of the most brutal things to happen in the 20th century. But a lot of people don't know about them. Like, almost everybody knows about the Holocaust, but they haven't heard of this massacre. And you know what's sad? The Japanese don't accept it. They also don't feel bad about Unit 731. They say all these stories were made by Westerners and the Chinese. But the Japanese were very racist back then, and they believed their race was the best, and they believed all the other races were below them. After World War II, Germany apologized for what the Nazis did to the world, but the Japanese believe they don't have to apologize. Not only did they not apologize for the Unit 731, they look at the people that did all that with pride. And they also gave medals to the officers that were responsible for the Nanjing Massacre, and some of those officers were executed just for show.